Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to kick us off with information about minimum wage jobs. Tomorrow, the minimum wage will rise to $14 per hour in the Portland urban growth boundary area, $12.75 per hour in other metropolitan areas and along the North Coast, and $12 per hour in most rural areas of the state. Oregon's 3 minimum wages will be among the highest rates in the nation. The highest minimum wage in the US will be in the District of Columbia at $15 per hour, followed by Washington at $13.69, Massachusetts at $13.50, and California at $13 per hour. Oregon's 3-tier minimum wage system was enacted by the legislature in 2016. The law sets the minimum wage at specific minimums each year through 2022. Then, starting in 2023, the minimum wage will be adjusted for inflation each year, so it maintains its purchasing power. Now, we don't yet know how many jobs will pay the minimum wage as of tomorrow in Oregon. We do know that at about the same time last year, in the third quarter of 2020, there were 123,000, or about 6.1% of all jobs that earned minimum wage. And that was a typical range, which has been 6 to 6.5% in recent years of minimum wage jobs as the total for the past several years. By county, the share of minimum wage jobs was smallest in Sherman County, 3% of the total, and it was highest in Wheeler County, where 17% of all jobs paid minimum wage. Multnomah County had the highest number of minimum wage jobs at 25,000, which was 5.1% of its total employment. Leisure and hospitality is the industry with the highest share of minimum wage jobs. Prior to the pandemic, about 1 out of 5 jobs in leisure and hospitality paid minimum wage. And for these businesses in particular, there's interest in knowing whether the minimum wage is pushing up the amount they'd have to pay otherwise to get workers on the job. Now, we've been talking about this in recent weeks, that employers have been in an intensely competitive environment competing for workers so far in 2021. And as we see labor shortages that employers have been reporting continue to play out, it's likely that the average starting wages for jobs are going to continue to be running above those minimums in 2021. Like I mentioned before, in our last briefing, leisure and hospitality alone packed 5 years of pre-pandemic hiring into the first 5 months of 2021. So we're expecting to see that intense competition continue as the economy fully reopens and recovers. And I say continue because the average starting wage for jobs was already running above the minimums before the pandemic. In 2019, the minimum wage that was enacted that year, leisure and hospitality and overall in the economy, in every area of the state, the starting wage was already above those minimums. And in 2020, the minimum wage that was enacted last July, the average starting wages in leisure and hospitality were already above that in every area of the state except for Clackamas County. My main point is that even though the minimum wage has been rising on the schedule for a handful of years, and even through a recession, the going rate for workers has been above those minimums. During the last economic expansion, going back to 2015, employers were telling us that labor shortages were their primary hiring challenge. And now during this recovery, labor shortages are a big challenge for them again. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to our acting director, David Gerstenfeld.
Thank you, Gail, and welcome everyone. With the legislative session having come to a close, I'd like to highlight a couple of the more recent pieces of legislation that impact the Employment Department. One of those is Senate Bill 172, which deals with unemployment benefit overpayments. Throughout the pandemic, we've worked hard to help people who have been overpaid benefits and were required to pay those funds back. We know what a hardship it can be to pay back benefits when somebody's out of work or just getting back on their feet. During the pandemic, we've been able to automatically defer some repayments twice, each for a 6-month period. But even after doing that, we're sometimes limited in how else we could help people who are facing overpayments because of honest mistakes that they made. Senate Bill 172 gives the Employment Department the ability to work with people who have overpayments and to waive paying back the money if repayment would be against equity and good conscience. We're pleased that we have this new tool, and we're encouraging people who've received an overpayment notice from us to go to unemployment.oregon.gov, and under the quick links column, click on the overpayment waiver section so that they can request a waiver. Of course, people who have tried to defraud the unemployment insurance system are not eligible for a waiver, nor would they benefit from any other provisions in Senate Bill 172. Another bill that passed recently was House Bill 3389, dealing with the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. The pandemic put a spotlight on the need to keep our UI trust funds solvent and to respond to employers who are heavily impacted by the pandemic. House Bill 3389 addressed that issue, and we're pleased that it received such strong bipartisan support. That bill was a collaboration of stakeholder groups, members of the legislature, the governor's office, and our department. House Bill 3389 reduces unemployment insurance tax impacts on employers in Oregon due to the COVID-19 pandemic, while still ensuring that the UI Trust Fund remains stable into the future. Besides the minimum wage increasing, the change this time of year also results in an increase in minimum and maximum benefit amounts. In early May, we released information about the new minimum and maximum benefit amounts for people filing new claims for unemployment benefits. Those new amounts go into effect in July, and again, that applies only to new claims. People who are already receiving benefits under an existing claim do not see their benefit amounts increase. We're also at a time where we do another quarter change review of benefit claims. We're required by federal law to review active claims every calendar quarter. In this situation, that means about 49,000 people's claims need to be reviewed, and this means that some of them will see a delay in receiving benefits. The quarter review process may take up to 5 weeks to complete for some claims, although most will be resolved more quickly. We know that people are relying on their benefits and that any time benefit stops, it creates a hardship. Our employees are dedicated to getting through this federally required review as quickly as possible, but it's important to us that we let people know when there might be interruptions in their benefits and to be transparent about the work that we're doing. We're emailing these claimants so they're not surprised if their benefits temporarily stop, and as soon as the review of their claim is complete, they'll receive all of the benefits they're eligible for, including any retroactive benefits. With this quarter change review and a lot of work being done to help people return to the workforce, more people may try to reach us with questions. It's been hard for many people to connect with us by phone throughout the pandemic. We've done a lot to respond to this, including setting up new ways for people to get their issues resolved online with our Contact Us form and to find answers with our FAQs and chatbot. Since the pandemic began, we've been hiring people to build a stronger and more responsive customer service base. Like some other Oregon employers, we're still struggling to find enough workers. On March 31st, we announced some ambitious goals to improve our customer service, including returning to our pre-pandemic customer service levels of answering 90% of the calls to us in under 5 minutes by the end of 2021, with an interim target of answering 80% of the calls within 15 minutes, and of resolving 90% of the online inquiries we receive within 7 days. We're very committed to transparency and to sharing what's working well and when we're making changes because we haven't lived up to our own high standards. While we've made very significant progress in our customer service goals, the tight labor market and the significant work being done to help people get back to work means we have not fully met those goals yet. We are making very real progress though. Looking at the Contact Us form, the online inquiries we receive, we're responding to more inquiries than we receive each week. Each week, we're getting about 8,000 submissions through the Contact Us form and responding to 11 to 12,000. The average time for us to respond to those inquiries has decreased from about a month to 13 and a half days, and some issues are being taken care of the same day that those inquiries are submitted. We're answering more telephone calls now, and we're answering them more quickly. The most recent average wait time on our hotlines is 34 minutes, a significant decrease from the 70-minute average of 3 months ago. We know that we're not yet where we want to be, but we have made progress, and we continue working towards resolving issues and answering questions as quickly as possible. And I've mentioned a couple of times the work that we're doing to help people return to work. Part of that is sending letters to remind people that they'll be required to actively seek work each week, starting the week of July 25th through 31st. Some good news is that most people who faced a deadline to register in iMatch Skills, our job match system, and whose deadline has passed, have already completed that registration process. Only about 1,700 people claiming benefits last week missed their deadline to register in iMatch Skills and haven't yet registered, and that means that their benefits have stopped. Another 8,600 people who claimed benefits for last week and have through July 3rd to register in iMatch Skills haven't yet done so. We're reaching out to those people again, reminding them to register in iMatch Skills and letting them know that if they register, their benefits will restart. If anybody's having trouble registering in iMatch Skills, they can look at our online tips and resources at unemployment.oregon.gov/return to work. Or if that doesn't help, they can call a WorkSource center, and the phone numbers are available on our website for local centers at worksourceoregon.org. Our WorkSource Oregon centers are opening next week to the public, starting on Tuesday, July 6th, by appointment only. An appointment can be made by calling local WorkSource Oregon centers. And although we understand people who are experiencing issues with their benefit claims may want to reach out to WorkSource Oregon centers for help, we want to stress that the WorkSource Oregon employees are not claim specialists. Their skill and expertise is in helping people get back to work. The best way to get claim issues taken care of is by using our Contact Us form at unemployment.oregon.gov or by calling our hotlines. People who need assistance in languages other than English about their benefit claims can also email us at oed_languageaccess@oregon.gov or call the Backup Language Assistance Hotline through Work Systems at 503-606-6969. Since March of 2020, when the pandemic began, the Employment Department has paid $9.9 billion to more than 600,000 people. That encompasses 14.8 million weeks of benefits that have been paid. Last week, we paid about $118 million to 142,000 people. We're looking forward to reopening our WorkSource centers next week and providing another way for people to get help getting back to work. While this is still a limited opening right now, operating by appointment only, it's a sign that the pandemic is waning and we're getting closer to our new normal. I want to restate my thanks for our employees for their efforts to reopen our WorkSource centers and for finding ways to provide help to Oregonians how they want to receive it, whether that's in person, online, or by telephone. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. And so the first question is from Lindsay Coyne at Nadwich. I'm sorry, Lindsay Nadwich at Coyne, excuse me. And Lindsay? Okay, we will follow up with that. Next up is Peter Wong with Pamplin Media. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First one for David. Modernization project starts up this coming month, July. How many people will you ultimately be devoting to that once you get to the full level?
I don't have that number in front of me. It will fluctuate over time at different stages. We have a core group of our own employees that are dedicated full time to that modernization effort, and the vendor will have its own team that's brought on board. We also constantly throughout the project will have our subject matter experts from throughout the agency spending varying amounts of times depending on what part of the modernization effort we're at. So for instance, the first part that we're dealing with a lot of the tax filing systems, we'll have our experts who do that work every day involved with designing the workflows, looking at the system and making sure that it's going to work as seamlessly as possible. So it will fluctuate quite a bit over time. I don't have the exact number of permanently kind of assigned people for the modernization effort right here, but that's something we can follow up on.
Okay, you said tax filing, this is the employer payroll tax, since
Right.
they wind
Right.
up
With the
appropriate-
modernization, the first effort that we're working on, the first part of it that will be released to the public is the combined payroll reporting system that will have the unemployment insurance and paid family and medical leave insurance taxes. And it's the same process that employers use to file some other state required payroll reports with us.
Gail, I have a question for you, and it's kind of more process or background in terms of what once somebody signs up for WorkSource, how's that divide between actually finding a job versus, for example, a worker trying to get improved skills or that would lead to either a higher paying job or a job in another field?
So to make sure I understand your question, you're asking process-wise, what does WorkSource do to help people skill themselves up or get into a different field?
Versus just finding a job in their current field. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start and then I'll see if David wants to add anything to it. So in terms of job seeking, when people come to us, there are opportunities to do all of the above. You can look for a job in your current field, or if you're looking for something different, we do offer different workshops, different programs to help people, whether or not, whether it's, I haven't been out of a job in the last 20 years and I need help figuring out how to best do a resume, or if it's about other programs or certifications that you can get that help you match up better for a job in a different field. We offer all types of services from, I want to get back to what I was doing before to help me get to my next thing.
And I think, Gail, you answered that well, that we really do provide both. And we try to offer a lot of those services ourselves, and the partners that we work with in the WorkSource Oregon offices have all kinds of programs, and we really work together. The key is really looking at what that individual person needs. Some people have the skills, they know exactly what type of job they want. They just need help finding one in their area. And that's something that we can certainly assist with. And as Gail said, other people either need to gain some skills or experience, or are looking to change careers completely. And we have lots of tools to help them. So it's a very individual look, but that's a lot of what our employees and the employees of our partners do, is have those individual discussions with people that want assistance to help them find the best path forward.
Okay, yeah, I only asked that because obviously, as we all know, there are people who are taking advantage of this period to reassess what they're doing and looking into going into other kinds of work. So obviously, that's why I asked the question. Thanks.
So next up is Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian. Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian. Okay, I'll circle around again. Next is Tom Cusack with the Oregon Housing Blog.
Hi, David. I wanted to follow up on a question about the quarterly unemployment insurance trust fund report. My recollection is that was last done in March, and I was expecting to see the most recent one published here at the end of the month. And I wonder if it's going to get done, and if so, when, and whether or not it will incorporate any of the changes that were in House Bill 3389.
We are intending to publish that updated quarterly report. I don't have the exact date, but we have been able to get that out pretty soon after the end of each calendar quarter. At this point, House Bill 3389, we fully expect it to be enacted. It hasn't actually been signed into law yet. So I kind of, depending on timing, that may dictate how much of that is built into the projections that go forward. It's something that we've been modeling closely, even as legislative proposals were being worked on. But I can't tell you today whether all of those impacts or any of them will be built into that projection that comes out soon.
Okay, and the second question, going back to your comment earlier about the I think you said it was quarterly review of 49,000 claims. Other than the outcome for the individual claimants, is there some reporting that happens in terms of improper payment rates that's the result of that process?
There's lots of reporting about what happens with new claims being filed and with any improper payments. Nothing that ties it directly to that process.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Rob Manning with OPB. Go ahead, Rob.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I have a question, I think, for Gail, which relates to what she said about at the tail end of your comments. You mentioned that actual wages are not necessarily, like, wages don't tend to correlate directly to where the minimum wage is, or wages tend to be higher. Can you explain that a little more, or talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So one of the things that I was talking about is whether or not the minimum wage, if it was set at a rate that was so high, then there might be a push for employers to pay higher starting wages than they otherwise would be able to do. Like, say, if I could get somebody for $10 an hour to come take my job, but now I have to pay this $12 minimum wage, is that a point of friction, or is that a point that's happening? And in the current labor market, we don't see that happening. We see that in this intense competition environment where we have a lot of hiring happening as the economy is reopening and recovering, that the average starting wage is already running above what that minimum wage would be. So it's not creating that point of friction. And so what I was saying is that we've seen for years heading into the pandemic that labor shortages have been the primary hiring challenge for employers. That's been the thing that they've told us through our job vacancy survey directly in their own words, has been their biggest hiring challenge for several years leading up to the pandemic. And now we see in this intense hiring situation that this is what they're facing again. They're facing labor shortages, and those labor shortages and that competition for workers is pushing that average starting wage, or the starting wages that they're offering, above what that minimum wage is.
Okay, thank you. My other question is whether or not, and I don't know if this is for Gail or for David, is whether you have a percentage yet of how many people who are currently receiving either UI or PEUC who have now registered with iMatch.
We don't have a percentage. We are looking at the numbers. We're kind of looking at it week by week because not everybody had the same deadline. So far, we've had about 25,000 people that have registered with iMatch since the start of May. And for context, I mentioned that we paid about 142,000 people last week. Not all of those people have to register in iMatch. The people that are on PUA because they're self-employed, which is a significant number, don't need to register in iMatch skills. And some people already have pre-existing registrations. So what we're watching the most closely is how many people might have their benefits paused or stopped because they don't register by their deadline. And that's where I said so far we're not seeing large numbers. It was about 1,700 so far for that first deadline that hit.
Okay, was that 1,700, sorry, people who were at risk of having their benefits paused, or had they actually had their benefits paused?
Those were the number of people who had benefits paused. In other words, they were claiming benefits, they were required to register in iMatch skills, and their particular deadline passed without them having registered. So it was about 1,700 people. And if those people do complete the registration so that we can help match them with jobs, then their benefits will resume if they meet all the other requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the next question goes to Keaton Thomas with KTU.
Hi, David and Gail. I guess my question here is more for David, and it's kind of following up to what he was just asking you about with people who've had their or who might have their payments delayed. I guess you mentioned this earlier, but how is the department working with people who have missed a deadline or are in jeopardy of missing a deadline to ensure that they're getting benefits that they need?
Well, the key thing for us is letting people know before the deadline and really pushing people to complete, in this case, that IMATCH registration. And that's both so that they can keep getting the benefits that they're eligible for by doing that required step, and also so that we can, importantly, help them find a job so that they can be employed and not need those benefits going on into the future. So we've been doing multiple communications, both of the kind of general variety, so through social media, asking for the assistance of you and your media colleagues to help get the word out through our general website, but also direct information to each person that they need to register, what their deadline is. And we've been doing multiple follow-ups. So we're using email, we're using physical mail for people that we don't have email addresses for. We're using our auto dialer campaigns for some of that outreach. And I mentioned that those people that are facing an upcoming deadline, we've told them what that deadline is several times, and we're doing this last outreach because we are getting pretty close to that July 3rd deadline. And we really want to make sure that people that do think they're going to still need benefits know what they need to do to complete the registration. And we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that we have resources to make it as easy as possible for them to complete that registration and use all of the other WorkSource Oregon tools to help find a new job.
Is that July 3rd deadline going to be the final deadline for registration with IMATCH?
It's not. It's really a rolling deadline because we still have new people that are filing new claims for benefits all the time, and we give people some time after they file their initial claim to do that. So the first deadline, once we reinstated this requirement, passed, and that's where there's the 1,700 people that were impacted. And then each week going forward, there are additional people who have that deadline. We had the initial group of about 200,000 people who we sent notices to, and that was anybody that had filed a claim for benefits this year, just because they are either filing for benefits now or they might be resuming seeking benefits, and we wanted to make sure that they knew of that requirement. But the individual deadline really depends on when that person filed their claim for benefits, and there will be more people each week going into the future who have a deadline to complete that registration.
And then I'm sorry, just for clarification, then additionally, people who are on PUA don't need to do this. So is this only for folks who are getting regular UI or one of the extension programs?
It's for people on regular UI, on the extension programs, and for people who are on PUA but aren't self-employed. And the reason for this is this IMATCH registration is a tool to help us match people up with jobs and to help them find their next employment. So for the people that are on PUA who are self-employed, they're focused on getting their businesses going. So that registration requirement doesn't really match up with the purpose of the program. For the people that are on PUA but aren't self-employed, we still want to make sure that we're helping them find their next traditional employment job.
Thank you. Do you mind if I ask one more question? This would be for Gail.
Why don't we wait until the end, and if there's time, we can try to come back.
Sounds great.
So I'm going to circle back to Lindsay Nadrich with COIN. Okay. And then Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian. Okay, so we can circle back to Keaton Thomas.
Thanks. I don't know if I've asked this before, and this I guess is probably better for Gail, but does this is just clarification really. When you talk about 142,000 people who were paid out in unemployment benefits within the last week, is that full number factored into the unemployment rate in Oregon, or does that unemployment rate only talk about for people who would have traditional employment. I guess I'm trying to figure out like some context around that 142,000 number, because when I go to like qualityinfo.org, I'm looking at continuing claims data from, say 2015, and it's like a maximum of 40,000 people. And so like I'm trying to figure like, are there 3 times as many unemployed people still right now in Oregon that there would have been in maybe a healthy economic year?
I think it's a good question, and it's an important thing to clarify. So whether or not you are receiving or have ever received unemployment benefits isn't factored into the statistical definition of being unemployed in Oregon. To be counted in the official unemployment rate, you need to be 16 or older. You need to be in the non-institutional civilian population. So I'm not in prison or in some sort of institution that would not allow you to take a job. And you need to be actively seeking work in the past 4 weeks, available and able to take a job if it's offered to you. Those are the parameters that are the definition of whether or not you're unemployed. And so there were about, it was either 226 or 229,000 unemployed people, or maybe it was I might have that number wrong. All I know is that in May, and I'll look up the number really quick to make sure that I'm not saying it incorrectly. In May, the number of unemployed Oregonians was actually slightly below what it would have been on average in any given month over the past couple of decades. So if you I've talked before about how the long run unemployment rate over the past 2 decades was about 6.8%. And in May, the unemployment rate was 5.9%. So we're below that unemployment rate. We're also below kind of the number of unemployment or the number of unemployed persons in Oregon that you would expect to see kind of along that same average. Does that help?
I think so. It just seems like then there's still a significant number of people on PUA who would have traditionally then not been able to get benefits. And maybe that's what I'm looking at.
And Keaton, a couple of other factors. I don't have the data in front of me that you're looking at, but if you're looking at the number of continued claims filed, I think the point you just made is one important one. PUA, which covers a whole group of people that by definition aren't eligible for regular unemployment, couldn't get benefits in 2015. So there wouldn't be any equivalent number of claims being filed then. We've also seen the workforce size grow since 2015. And we also have the other extension programs that are at play now that didn't exist in 2015 in the same way. So there are some differences in the benefit programs that are available that impacts how many people are receiving benefits now compared to 2015 when we were in a very different economic time.
Thanks for your help. I appreciate it.
I checked myself just to make sure that I was being correct. And there were about 126,000 unemployed Oregonians in May. And like I was talking about in an average, at any given time, it would have been a little over 130, about 133,000. So we're below kind of that, typical or long run average number.